Hello, welcome everybody. It's good to be here. It's good to realise that so many people are being involved and interested in tonight.
Yeah, it's great to have you along, Stuart. You and I are probably the longest serving presenters in Live on Air, which has gone past a year's worth of broadcasts now, along with Max Thompson, who I think is watching. Tonight is quite special. We're going to be talking about music and worship, and we've got a number of questions lined up for Stuart, and he's got a couple of curly questions lined up for me as well. So, to begin with, Stuart, a service of worship is very dependent on music. Why do you think that is?
Because I think music is an important part of life. It's not just a service that's very dependent on music. It's that all meeting together is dependent on music. All living is dependent on music. That's why I'm a musician.
You say all life is dependent on music? Do you mean the quality of life is dependent on being able to make music, or what?
Music is an essential part of becoming fully human. That's what I mean.
In the same way, perhaps, that speech is.
Speeches and maths and sciences and phys eds.
Well, I'm not sure that you'd want to put maths in there, but I do think it's important to understand that we live by doing sorts of rhythmic gestures, that we speechify, there's something in the way our throats and our minds work together. We like to make song, etc.
I think the best parallel is with speech. Imagine how deprived the quality of life would be without speech.
Yeah, to some extent it's diminished. I wouldn't say that it's always diminished in the way you might be suggesting, but for the most part there's a diminution if you don't have speech, and I think there's a diminution if you can't sing and you can't express yourself and you can't move in some kind of way. But nevertheless, you haven't answered my question. A service of worship is rather dependent on music. Tell me why that is.
Well, certain things happen when... Well, let's look at the kind of music that we're used to in church, or that I'm used to in church. You can say whether it applies to you or not. But music in church for me is singing the hymns and listening to any music played to me.
Right. So it's singing and it's listening.
Now, when people sing together, it's like playing team sports in the Olympics. There's a quality of relating to people in a team situation that's special and specially important for the growth of personality and socialization. Very important areas to develop in living.
When we're in a congregation, just as ordinary members of the congregation, we do have to grow in terms of understanding, don't we?
Oh,
so
yes.
You're saying we've also got to grow in terms of musical appreciation of one another?
Oh, yes, and of the music we're being involved in.
What if I don't appreciate any of the music I'm being involved in? I mean, a young person today is not likely to come into the majority of our Methodist congregations in New Zealand, irrespective of what culture it is, because everything is done from an ancient perspective rather than an in the now perspective.
You're forcing me to think separately of music in church from music in the community. And I tend to look at the best music in church typifies the successful principles of music in the community, music in schools.
Well, look, I can go along with that insofar as it typifies the best qualities of music making, but let's take the fact that many congregations still use the beautiful instrument of the organ. But how often do you hear organ music being played on radio stations? Unless you go to the specialist concert program, at which only, 1% of the population or 0.5% of the population goes there. So my point is that much of the music making going on in churches today is actually irrelevant to where most people are at in terms of music making, musical appreciation, musical listening.
And I would agree with that on the same grounds that I would agree if I was teaching music in schools and I had a predominant of playing music just for the basset horn. Many kids wouldn't even know what a basset horn was. And so you're not relating the experience, you're trying to develop the particular sensitivities through to the experience of the people in front of you.
Yeah, but then you're getting into quite technical aspects that I don't think the average congregation really wants to be involved with. So let me focus your attention.
Now, can I pick up one point there?
Yeah.
You say I'm being technical. I don't think the congregation needs to be technical, but those who choose the music and develop the music need to have a technical understanding of their area of supposed expertise.
Yeah, now that's very true. So that applies to worship leaders, etc.
Of course.
Now, one of the reasons I wasn't just holding Stuart's hand, but of course, when he started thumping the table, it has an effect on our microphone system, which, as everyone who watches our live on air knows, is a little bit shaky at the best of times. So, Stuart, what are the two most important things a worship leader needs to know about music when they're actually in front of the congregation?
That's a good question, David. Well, they need to know the music that they're promoting. You'd think that would be a sine qua non, it's a simple thing. But I've seen people present a new hymn and they haven't really understood the basic things about the hymn tune. You've got to know your subject. And I think you've got to know people. You've got to know how what you have chosen as your musical example to be shared relates to their experience.
Okay, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. But how would you apply that to the fact that you were almost once sent to jail over a performance rights issue? Now, we're not used to thinking of Mr. Manins as a jailbird or potential jailbird, but this was a very real issue.
Well, I did what I believe was one of the first performances of Jesus Christ Superstar when I was in
New Zealand.
In New Zealand, yeah, a lecturer at Teachers College, and I wanted experiences that were enriching for my students and also that they could relate to well. And that had just come out in the media. And I was looking actually at comparative musicology from an educational point of view, and I was comparing Jesus Christ Superstar, the treatment of certain material, with the Messiah.
Oh yeah, Handel's Messiah.
Yeah, so it was a comparative thing. And we performed Jesus Christ Superstar alongside Messiah. In the same way, the following year, we did Dido and Aeneas and West Side Story.
Oh, right.
The same
okay. So,
Shakespeare plot.
Right. Now, this is really what you mean when you say that the worship leader, in this case it was the lecturer in the Teachers College music department, was actually contextualizing the ancient with the modern.
Many years I spent travelling around the world with students performing Renaissance and medieval music. Now, much of that is not directly related to the experience of music of people today. But there's something in reviving the past as long as you see it as representative of the past. It's not the music for today, but it can speak to us today if it's performed well enough according to the criteria required at the time it was used.
Now, I would say that there's a very similar thing when we're using archaic language in church. Just about every congregation I know goes rip-roaring off, they want the latest version of the Lord's Prayer. But in actual fact, if you think, as long as you don't think that it was written in the language of King James, but if you think of the courtly language of that time and the way in which the Lord's Prayer was put in that form 4.5 centuries ago, what you get is a sense of occasion in worship, the sense of occasion that you're participating in a drama or ritual that actually has come and travelled a long way in the passage of time. Now, it's very similar, isn't it? Dido and Aeneas from Purcell.
Yeah. Very similar. I had quite a good thought there. It's gone.
Never mind. Tell us why you almost went to jail. I'm always fascinated.
Oh, well, yeah, I was doing this thing with Jesus Christ Superstar. I didn't say this morning in church when you discussed it with me, but I also got letters from well-intended fundamentalist enthusiasts telling me that by using this music, I was corrupting, but I think these are the words they used, corrupting the minds of the impressionable minds of the young people entrusted to my care. And I thought, what a load of rubbish. I won't respond to this, but how unfortunate.
They would have been happy to see you go to jail. Tell us why you almost went to jail.
Well, there was this entrepreneur, Harry Miller, who came to New Zealand at the time. And I don't know why, but he set up a whole system. He told the press that I was a megalomaniac treading on musical fields who were outside my expertise. Now, he had no right to say that, really. I was just as good a conductor of comic opera or anything else. I was trained as a general musician. And I wondered why. And he said that if I went on performing that particular work, Jesus Christ Superstar, he would sue me. And I couldn't understand why he would sue me, because I had bought the music, hired the music from APRA, the Australasian Performing Rights Association. I'd done all the right things that needed to be done. I'd paid them for the scores. I'd been working with the scores. They knew what I was doing. And he comes in and says, I'm doing a dreadful thing. I've got a disease with my personality, a megalomania for doing it. And he would sue me if I went on with it. I actually had to get a lawyer to decide whom I could perform it to and who weren't allowed in. And the people who weren't allowed in after the last rehearsal, as I told you in church this morning, had to go outside. And for the first time in my life, I was aware of people because their faces were nosed into the glass windows. They weren't allowed into the performance and had to watch us from outside.
Well, as I've noted, I think any church would be absolutely singing, praise the Lord if we had people standing at our windows trying to get in. But unfortunately, most of them are standing there trying to get out, Stuart, after some of our musical performances. Okay, so I think that's a great story. You and I both know from pretty bitter experience what happens over copyright issues and that kind of thing. We've both been there, we've both done that, and what I would want to say and encourage all kinds of churches, congregations, whoever might be picking this up and watching it is, make sure that you do get your copyright grounds clear so that you can stand on very firm terra firma.
I'd agree entirely with that. And I'd followed that right from the start.
Yeah. Okay, Stuart, you had a question that you wanted to ask me.
Well, how important do you think, as a preacher, that music is in the worship service?
Well, I've thought about this a lot, and I'm going to reach a conclusion that will probably surprise and shock 90% of you. I would say that the music is absolutely fundamental to a service going well for the vast majority of congregations. But from my personal point of view as a preacher, I can work just as happily with recorded music, clips on YouTube and other kinds of media, as well as live music. And in fact, sometimes I don't need music at all to operate within the context of Christian worship. And I'll tell you why, Stuart. You'll appreciate this because you're quite a superb singer. And when I was minister in Timaru, I used to have to go to a number of rest homes and do services. And at one particular home, it was one of the Presbyterian homes, and they couldn't afford or they couldn't find a pianist or an accompanist. So I used to go and I'd sing solo, unaccompanied, hymns like When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. And I couldn't understand why the old people were crying, and I thought it must be because of the beauty of the words, but I rather realised in retrospect it was the absolute inability of me to sing a hymn. And from that point on, I began to realise that you have to, as a preacher, work mainly with words and images. If you can also work with music, then you've got it made. You've got the start, if you like, of a good production, a good film, a good video, whatever. But if you haven't got musical people in the congregation, you really don't want to do it badly. That's my point.
Yeah,
there's no point in doing it badly.
That's a good point. And you would apply the same thing if you had limitations in speaking, wouldn't you?
Yeah, precisely.
You wouldn't engage a preacher who couldn't articulate.
Well, I don't know. Many congregations have done that in the past.
Prove me wrong.
Yes,
I know.
That's right.
That's a little unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree. What's going to happen in church music as congregations age and dwindle, I think, is going to become a very significant, very serious question that clergy have to answer. And as they answer that question, it may force them to start thinking about what they're actually doing in church services anyway in the 21st century. Are they simply perpetuating an old form for the sake of perpetuating the old form? Or are they going to manipulate and move with that old form and turn it into something new and relevant that people will be knocking at the door or faces at the windows?
Well, you know what I think about this. And I thought you made a very good point in your sermon this morning, David. You said we may be getting old, and we all looked around at each other, and yes, and there were a few people under 60, not very many. And you said, as an old set of oldies, what can we do? We can have an idea of what's the best in anything for our congregation. And just because we're old, it doesn't diminish the need or the opportunity to support that.
Right. Now, I've very deliberately got Stuart along this evening. I had hoped to just support what he said. I had hoped to be able to share with you. Stuart, how old are you?
80
something.
83,
84.
Next week or something.
Stuart and Prue Bell and myself were involved last week in trying to get a series of recordings here in the e-learning centre at Trinity-at-Waiake, where Stuart was singing the song cycle in his work Gospel. And unfortunately, my audio recording wasn't good enough to be able to broadcast that song cycle tonight, but we're re-recording this coming Tuesday, and it will not only be available in live on air and YouTube, but also on a variety of other things, including SoundCloud as podcasts. So we'll put the whole cycle up in SoundCloud, but I'd like to take you over to a different layout. So our video will go off, and we're just going to share a discussion of Jonah and then Gospel. So you'll see coming up on your screens in the next few seconds the PDF that you can download when we finish the broadcast. The song that Stuart wrote, The Tale of Jonah and the Whale and the Worm. A song for voices and piano by Manins and Gibson. And Colin Gibson very helpfully put this together And there's a lovely drawing there by a former member of this congregation, artist Anne Gray. And what we have in this is a complete musical score for people to do. And Stuart, I forgot at our last recording that we should also include the tale of Jonah for a separate podcast. So that's the first, and let me just hide this pod and bring up the second.
While he's doing that, can I tell you why I wrote it?
Yep.
Because you gave a series of talks or sermons on Jonah and the whale, and for the first time I realised that the setting and the understanding and the main intention of a book was a humorous one within the books of the Bible. And the humour is deliberate, right from the beginning to the end. And I don't know of many hymns that catch that approach.
Yeah, no.
That's why I wrote it, for fun.
Yeah, it was great that you did. The vast majority of hymns about the story of Jonah are dreadful. You know, what's my favourite? It comes from the 19th century, I think, from the Anglican collection, Ancient and Modern. My God, this is an awesome place without coal or candle, only fishers' tripes to eat and fishers' tripes to handle. Well, I can imagine a congregation singing that about the...
It's humour, but its humour is an irony.
Yeah, precisely. So what Stuart, or another thing that I asked Stuart to do, and we've been collaborating now since, well, for a very long time, in our AIM publications, but I asked them to write a series of Bible stories for young people, and he chose the Beatitudes to work with, and we have this published as gospel, beautiful production where Stuart has put together words, modern words to tell Bible stories, but alongside of gospel now, we have the complete song cycle that goes with it. So when you download this version of gospel, it's minus the song cycle. And so we hope in the next week or so to publish the song cycle with the podcasts and the words together. So those are things coming up that say, yeah, you can be 80 years old or you can be 8 years old. The important thing is to get involved musically. And the more we get our congregations involved, the stronger a chance we've got of making some kind of gospel connection with people. Anything you'd like to say before we bring the broadcast to an end? Because we're trying a new format in Live On Air, and I really don't want to have to edit a whole lot. We're almost at 7:25. A couple of last closing comments from you, Stuart.
Yeah, the overriding comment that comes to my mind is the ease with which you can solve the problem that I sense in much of what I hear from the pulpit of people being given a space to fill in and then struggling to fill it in. I listen to speakers and I categorize them into sheep and goats. Those who've really got something they want to share, and those who've got a job and they have to fill in 50 minutes a week.
Yeah.
And what I see you doing is getting to know the people in your audience. It's not a problem, because any audience has a wide variety of expertise. But if you start from that source and just develop that and share it within your congregation, you've got plenty of really valid, up-to-date, practical things to handle.
Absolutely. Now, virtually everything we're publishing now in Live On Air, in AIM Publishing, through Kiwi Connection, it's sort of all interlinked. But virtually everything has its genesis, its origin, amongst the creative things that people have done in the congregation. Every congregation has people like this in abundance. The real question is, how do you take their work, because 99% of them just have no clue about how to get that work promoted. How do you actually get it seen? How do you actually get it into a wider audience? And so often the work is lost that has such pertinence and relevance and sheer dynamism. Stuart and I have been working with Joan Miles' book years and years ago, and it's been an absolute delight to be able to go back. Joan gave me permission to start working on this, and we've created a zine, a beautiful little zine. The zines are something else in Facebook. Just click on a zine and you're taken to the author's work, and the links in it go live in all kinds of directions. All of these things are being done so that the folk that are involved in ordinary congregations, we're just an ordinary congregation up here in Auckland, and we've got ordinary congregations in Riverton and Fielding and goodness knows where, you too can come on in and have that work given a wider audience, because I really feel that it deserves it. So,
but I want to say one more.
Okay, one final comment. After that, finito.
The other requirement is you've got to have a David Bell in the equation.
Well, I don't know about that.
You've got to have a David Bell or a David Bell equivalent.
Well, yeah, let's forget that. I'll edit that bit out.
You don't have to be modest, David.
And I've just